So I just wanted to make an after video summary after being on Billy's show. Uh, I guess it was a couple of days ago. Thanks again, Billy. First time I've been able to have like a discussion like that, and I don't know, probably years. So yeah, it was kind of energizing and refreshing. Um, Sorry I was kind of unfocused. I, it's a long, complex subject. I was trying to get at the complexities of, what is liberalism? How does it develop? On which social layers does it develop? Why does it develop like that? And what is the relationship to liberal propaganda and the historical lived reality in the case of what I've known best in the last 10 years from researching the history of first Tsarist Belarus, Weißrussland, on through Polish dictatorship or Polish colonial Western Belarus or occupied Soviet Belarus and then liberated um, Soviet Belarus and then occupied by the capitalists again and the genocide, etc. Like what's the consequences, right, of Mearsheimer's uh, liberal ideology and his position, his social position, from which flows his kind of ideological and political position, and also his role in maintaining the world we live in, and all of the useful idiots, the mass of petty bourgeoisie who follow a collaborating intellectual like Mearsheimer. So and just to emphasize some points, hopefully I won't drone on too long. I'll try to keep this within 10 minutes maybe, or possibly 15, but I don't know, that I didn't reinforce this or emphasize it, but Mearsheimer and certainly my father, and to a lesser extent my mother, they were colleagues through the University of Chicago and in academia. And, Mearsheimer's politics in part, and the general experience of growing up as basically an academic brat, is part of the reason I and, many others who went through my kind of experiences, we never went into academia, never wanted to go within, 100 feet of a job as a professor. So, yeah, just, morally, the whole kind of feudal social atmosphere there, work atmosphere, and the hypocrisy, the profound hypocrisy of, you see it very much today. Academia is a place where conformism and this kind of liberal insanity of gender ideology or whatever is enforced, and someone like me, in that world, or one or two off from that world, the white collar office culture, I lasted like 10 minutes there. I had no tolerance for that sort of bullshit, and they had no tolerance for me. They absolutely hated my guts. Just natural. Just ugh. Anyway, so what else? But the end result of the realist school is mass death, mass alienation, and misery. You see this reflected in the declining population statistics, not only in Ukraine, which has lost tens of millions in population over the last, even before the war started, they lost I think it was tens of millions in population. People immigrating, the whole country was a wreck, deindustrialized, just incoherent, corrupt, depressed, just horrible. It contrasts that to the Soviet period, Um, Whatever you think of, the Soviet bureaucracy, and generally speaking, more than half the time, I don't really care what people in the West think of the Soviet bureaucracy, including my father would, spout all sorts of nonsense and, kind of smears. And, okay, you had stability on the one hand. On the other hand, you had like kind of intellectual death in terms of history, perhaps, or political theory, perhaps, or social engagement among the population. Lack of internal democracy for workers at a certain level. But look at what's happened in the last 30 years. I mean, mass depopulation of the Baltics, Ukraine, Romania, the Balkans. It's just an absolute, miserable mess. And, you can't make any excuses, liberals, or realists, or whatever you call yourselves, Western petty bourgeoisie or Eastern petty bourgeoisie. This is your fault. You got the world you wanted. It's been a generation. It's been an absolute disaster. We had the October Revolution. That was an event, the greatest act of liberation in human history. And the losers in the West and here in the East may mock that, but you're idiots. You're hated. Over here, 2/3 of the population hates your guts, and half your country in the U.S. hates your guts. You've made such a mess of things that you have no moral standing to criticize the October Revolution. But basically, Mearsheimer and the Western petty bourgeoisie, have facilitated and apologized for genocide, mass misery, the criminals, the lumpen proletarian filth, East and West, that enforce this, disgusting, decadent order, so that, your masters, that, you shine their shoes, so they can continue to steal, trillions of dollars. And you're anyway. So in the whole world today, you got your wish. It's capitalist. Some people may entertain illusions that China is socialist, or but no. So okay, realism, it's relevant, because we live in a capitalist world. But Mearsheimer, and those like him, they represent the more reasonable ideology of the Freikorps. Those who murdered the future, basically, right? Like in 1991, when I was 23, the future ended, right? It was, okay, now it's reality. The game. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? As the, gutter lumpen proletariat, would say to me, in the last 30 years. It's all about the money, So, so it's, this is bourgeois ideology in liberalism and social democracy and developmentalism, of the third world. It's all a piece. There's hope indirectly from developmentalism in the third world, just like there was hope, 50 years, 60 years ago under Nasser, let's say, that, the Egyptian working class, Cairo, could, I don't know, like as a communist, if the Middle East went into crisis, if the working class of Cairo would organize Soviets and then overthrow capitalism, etc. It's a nice thought. What's the saying? A dream is a wish your heart makes. So, but be that as it may, other lands, like my paternal lands in the the Kresy, the borderlands of the West, what became the Western Soviet Union. They had to claw their way out of barbarism, and at the cost of genocide and mass death, and that Mearsheimer system, brought to us. It was bloody, brutal, and even murderous. To pretend otherwise, it's not honest and not realistic. This is what happens. The rest of the world, is historically, 100 years ago or whatever, there's 3 feet of horse shit on the street. There was no sewage system hardly. And, that's how my great-great-grandfather, Mikhail Kantrowitz, ended up with a heart defect he was born with, how the bacteria got to his heart and killed him at the age of 24. And then, probably killed my, probably gave my grandfather a stroke living in New York City. There are other factors involved, but, dirtiness, environmental dirtiness, barbarism, capitalist barbarism, social murder, as Friedrich Engels put it. That's your capitalist realism, Mearsheimer, for the majority of the planet. For Joseph Borrell's garden, and whatever, the top 20% in the garden, the petty bourgeoisie, which backs the Freikorps, Hitler, Pinochet, all of that filth. They want to maintain their privileges. So, they maintain that system of social murder, and if necessary, they will send the Nazis, like they did in 1941, to murder anyone inconvenient to the maintenance of that system. So, but, now I guess the hope is, Russia, China, Africa, the Middle East, the BRICS, they're getting together, they're developing economically and socially, and hopefully from that, their working classes can develop and then, eventually lead a rebellion against capitalism. That's, my hope. As for, there was a commenter on the video, what about poor Ukraine and their national self-determination? Lenin, said 100 years ago, that's not an immutable right. That depends upon the working class and, their will. The will of coffee shop owners, the will of NGO wanks, the will of paid CIA collaborators, or Zelensky's, scum like that. That's not the national will. Over here in Russia, they're not that smart. Okay, sure. But they are smart enough to, to have, I guess, let's say, as a whole, the society is smart enough, and maybe even the worker peasants here are smart enough to demand, although that's a question, but the society as a whole, let's say, they still have the gains of the October Revolution in the form of socialized or semi-socialized, housing, education, medicine, food, transportation, culture, the West, the U.S. foremost among that is and Western Europe, the Netherlands, etc., ruling class there, and the petty bourgeoisie of these countries is looking to destroy and to steal that, and to murder our people again. So, that's absolutely not acceptable, and that's why, President Putin has said, if you cross the Russian border and we feel an existential threat to the Russian state, we're going to launch the nukes. And that'll be the end of everything, So, Scott Ritter, I know you're upset at the thought of, Lindsey Graham feeling threatened, but, he's a waste of life. Most of the Congress, they're wastes of life. They're the reactionary scum whose grandparents or, whatever forebears in the Confederacy, they were not shot and strung up like they should have been. or not deported from the U.S. in the case of Nancy Pelosi and her family, or whatever, people like that we put in a gulag here 100 years ago, or if they were lucky, or just took away their civil rights for 5 years while they got a real job and integrated into society with workers, normal people. So what else? Yeah, right, I think I went through all of that. Um, all of this human rights crying, oh, the poor Ukrainians. Well, in the end, as my friends here in Russia say, Central and Western Ukraine, they're rednecks. They're rednecks in Russia too, but the difference is the rednecks of Ukraine basically went along with the 10% actively who are Nazis, in the Ukrainian army or in whatever, yeah, in the Ukrainian army and, police forces, etc. They accepted that, for lace panties and cleaning toilets in Warsaw. So, you're stupid. And stupid people get killed by the hundreds of thousands. So, you know, no one, they mocked, let's be real. These filthy imperialists, they used the genocide of my father's people, as a joke, basically. It was a joke, to create the state of Israel in the middle of hostile, backward Arabs, and reward the most right-wing, stupid Jews with political power, while mocking the victims and lying about who they actually were, what their political movements were about. You knew what you were doing. Schindler's List. My God. A fucking German Nazi capitalist with a heart of gold. That's a sick fucking joke. Only a bunch of Epstein's clients could come up with that sort of sick, twisted shit. So, yeah, and what else? I had mentioned in my previous response to Mearsheimer, I had to look up population figures for the Soviet Union. In terms of his bullshit about Stalin killing more of his own people than Hitler. I mean, that's just a Nazi liberal Western trope, Freikorps, garbage. I looked up the Wikipedia version of the Great Soviet Encyclopedia. Who knows what the hell that means. But anyway, like an enemy source off of Yandex. And what I found was from 1913 to 1959, the population of the Soviet Union, which was roughly equivalent to the Tsarist Empire, increased 140%. And that's after 27 to 30 million murdered, thanks to your friends, John. Now what do we see under, capitalist realism? The populations have cratered. The the Baltics are going to, be extinguished, and good riddance. They're backward Nazi Chihuahua states, populated by idiots and losers. So, good riddance. And Ukraine, we'll see. There'll be some version of it like Chechnya, gets resurrected probably. But, the stupid redneck collaborators, well, there's, 500,000 of them fertilizing the soil now. What? What we see through your capitalist realism is death, misery, war, and possible nuclear annihilation. Looking at, lunatic loser filth like Lindsey Graham or Nancy Pelosi or, any of that, slimy Eurotrash filth or Uncle Tom filth, God, no wonder Lloyd Austin couldn't answer that filth, Graham. He probably grew up around, plantation, overseers like Graham, and is, basically was brought up to lick their boots. So, on the Russian, Chinese, the rest of the world, our side, my life ended in 1991 with the end of the Soviet Union, with the betrayal here of myself and billions of others. And 15 million, upwards of 15 million, were murdered here by filth like Tobias. So, billions around the world. I have a little bit of hope, I guess. But I'm 55, and I don't really care anymore. I'd like to have a girlfriend or five here, have a better life than I've had in the last 30 years. It's been hell. I've had to live, among filth like you, Lindsey Graham and Mearsheimer and all you other filth, and I'm so glad to be away from you. But what? But if the U.S. tries to blackmail China, Russia, Africa, and the rest of the world, they basically, we're going to tell you to go fuck yourselves, and we may go into nuclear annihilation, and frankly, I don't think people really care. Those of us who survived the last 30 years. So, if world without a working class, without working class struggle is, it's a living death. So that's what we've been living for 30 years. You've enjoyed your freedom and your Nikes and your REM, and we've been living death. So, the question, will in the U.S., I doubt it, but, would the working class end Lindsey Graham and, Congress? I think it's doubtful. But the rest of the world isn't going to put up with your bullshit any longer. America, ruling class, freaks, or, the Western morons in the ruling class there. So, you've got a choice to make. The more sane, petty bourgeois or working class members of the West, are you going to let the freaks, end it all? Or are you going to throw them out of political power and, be at least, minimally reasonable? So, but, at the end of the day, I guess, we care, but, there's a limit, right? So, yeah.